The following program is brought to you in conjunction with the folks at Grace to All with Paul Gray. Now we bring to you the Agape Guy Show with your host, Lenny Manning.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love.
Hello and welcome to the Agape Guy Show. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. Today I'm going to be talking about a very controversial subject, so I'm giving a word of warning for controversial content. I'm going to be picking up where we left off from our last episode. That was the episode where I was talking about evidence in favor of near-death experiences, or NDEs. I left off when I mentioned that people who had NDEs had also seen other things. I've seen a few videos where people who had an NDE spoke about these other things that I'm going to be talking about today. You see, many people who had an NDE say that they see some different types of paranormal activity and ghosts. Perhaps it's because they've been on the other side where those spirits reside, so they're accustomed to it. I've even seen a few people in grace-oriented Facebook groups talk about this type of stuff. I've even seen some who said that they had some paranormal activity in their houses. So that's the subject I'd like to talk about on the show today. I'm talking about ghosts and paranormal activity. I'd also say that with this subject, I'm not going to try to force anyone to accept my views, nor am I going to say that my view is the only correct view, nor am I going to say that you must believe as I do, or else you're a heretic or something like that. There's nothing like that here, and I'm not here to call anybody names like heretic or anything like that either. Yet I've tried to do some research to reach some well-researched answers. So I hope what I say is reasonable and doesn't give anyone the opportunity to say I'm completely unreasonable. Besides, I've seen several folks who had to reassess their views on this issue. So, here we go. See if you've heard of this recent poll taken in the United States. You see, in a recent poll, 1/4 of the people in the United States said that they believed that they had lived in a haunted house. Now, I know some of you might be saying, "Oh, come on, Lenny, aren't those just a bunch of tall tales told by people who are a little off-kilter?" Well, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I'd have said similar things. Well, I used to have serious doubts about some of these types of things, and I also doubted that NDEs were authentic. Yet, I've seen a lot of evidence for NDEs, and I too have had a Type 2 NDE. So I've seen some of this stuff for myself. Then again, maybe I've seen a little bit of some other strange stuff as well. I'll talk more about that a little later in the show. First, I'd like to talk about some facts, some evidence, and some things science can tell us. So let's talk about some of that evidence and the science first. Science tells us that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can move from one state to another. So some materials decay in the dirt, and other plants absorb those nutrients to produce more plants or fruit and vegetables. Sometimes wooden materials decay and turn into dust. Even refined metals will eventually rust or corrode and possibly turn into dust. That's the second law of thermodynamics, which is called entropy. Science also tells us that what may appear to be a solid object isn't really a solid object. It is composed of molecules and atoms that are actually a long distance away from each other. The atoms are similar to planets revolving around a sun in the solar system. The frequency vibrations and electromagnetic fields of energy around the atoms is what makes objects feel solid. So in a way, we are not solid objects, but our bodies are made of mostly energy and frequency vibrations. So, since we are made of energy and frequency that cannot be destroyed but transferred to other states, we never really die. Our spirits likely exist in another frequency. So when our body dies, we transfer to another state of existence at another frequency, and our spirits move on. Have you ever seen the movie that's titled Lucy? The movie is about a young woman named Lucy who accidentally ingests a crystallized chemical. That chemical makes her super intelligent. One part of the movie shows a guy being afraid that he's going to die, and Lucy makes a very interesting statement. Lucy says, "We never really die." The scientific principle I just mentioned shows what Lucy was referring to. We don't die, we only transfer from one state of existence to another state of existence. We depart from our body, and our spirit moves on. If you have ever seen a chart that displays the spectrum of frequencies, you'll find some interesting things. For one thing, we can only see and hear a very small fraction of the frequency spectrum. There are vast amounts of the spectrum we cannot see, hear, or touch. It doesn't mean they don't exist, but it simply means we can't perceive them for the most part. I can also say that I've seen a few different experts who come from a few different perspectives on this subject. Let me show you what some of those experts say about this subject. From what I understand, science has shown that some people's brains produce excess psychokinetic energy. That excess energy can bring about some very interesting reactions, results, and events. Psychokinesis, or psychokinetics, can also be abbreviated PK. I think psychokinesis and telekinesis are different. Telekinesis is where a person can supposedly move objects with their mind at will, yet there's no evidence that this energy is controllable. So psychokinesis, or PK, cannot be controlled at will. It seems to fire off randomly. That can happen when a person is stressed out or highly irritable. This usually only has to do with a small percentage of people, as far as I know. Now, sometimes when excess psychokinetic energy proceeds from a person, it can cause different things to occur. Sometimes it can make electric lights flicker. Sometimes it can make electrical devices seemingly turn on and off by themselves. It can also cause objects to seemingly move by themselves. Yet when it causes objects to move, it is an uncontrollable action, such as it can make a fork or knife to slide off the edge of a kitchen counter. Yet a person cannot make the knife fly in a specific direction they want it to go, or move when they want it to. So it cannot be controlled at will. I've seen one situation where a person pounded their fist on a table and started yelling, and that made the lights flicker. So apparently the release of that excess psychokinetic energy made some of those types of things happen. Now, some TV shows might be a bit overhyped and oriented towards getting a few screams rather than real evidence. Yet that doesn't mean the whole field of psychokinesis or paranormal studies are completely false or fake. As I noted on the last episode, they used to say the same thing about NDEs, but now the proof is in favor of NDEs. There have been a few scientific studies that showed some of this in small ways. The studies showed that at least small amounts of extra psychokinetic energy are produced in the brains of some people. although it seemed like it wasn't controlled by human will or desires, though. It seemed to be uncontrollable for the most part. I could list a few studies, but they weren't conclusive as far as what some people consider rigorous science or rock-solid evidence. It didn't give as much evidence as some scientists would want, yet it did give some evidence. I've listed a few of the studies here in a list I've got right here. 1. Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, or PAIR, Lab. That was done in the 1980s through 2007. 2. University of Edinburgh Kostler Parapsychology Unit from 1985 to the 2010s. 3. The Rhine Research Institute and their 1985 study shown in the Journal of Parapsychology. 4. Stanford Research Institute, SRI, experiments in the 70s. 5. There were also studies done in Europe, or Eastern Europe and Russia at different points from the 1960s to the 1980s. Those were mostly with Uri Geller and Nina Kulagina. Yet most folks in the West didn't have access to those studies or things written about those studies. I've also heard some people assert that in some cases the psychokinetic energy can seem to project images. So it can project images that will make a ghost seemingly appear in the room. That might be the case with some situations, but I'm not so sure it's the same in 100% of all situations. I've also heard some folks say that all ghosts show up by means of PK energy projecting animated images of ghosts. They also say the solution is merely to stop believing in ghosts. Yet I would point out some situations where people who don't believe in ghosts moved into a house and started to see ghosts. Yet they move out of that house and never see ghosts again. Then someone else who doesn't believe in ghosts moves into that same house and they see ghosts too. That next family sees paranormal activity and then quickly moves out. Once they move out, they no longer have any problems with paranormal activity or related issues. So there seems to be some other issues at play. Trying to not believe in it might work sometimes, but not necessarily all the time. Now, other issues at play might be similar to that of people who have NDEs. I'm referring to people dying and waiting different amounts of time to go into the light or go to heaven. Apparently, the gap in time can differ for different people. It seems like when some people die, they immediately seem to go through a tunnel and fly into a bright light. Then again, there are other people who pause for several seconds, minutes, or maybe much longer. So perhaps these ghosts might be people who paused a bit longer, or they got stuck here for some reason. There are also legends that indicate that some people who die in traumatic ways get stuck here in our earthly realm. Maybe they didn't know they were dead or felt like they still had some things they wanted to do. Maybe they were afraid of the afterlife or that God would punish them. Now, I know some people have different opinions about this subject, and those different ideas can be quite different. There are traditional Christians who say that the very second you die, your spirit goes to heaven or hell. So atheists say that when you die, that's it. There's no afterlife at all, and you simply cease to exist. That seems even more dark and gruesome in my opinion. Then there's people who believe in universal reconciliation and believe all people will eventually get to the good place. This seems to coincide with what people see in near-death experiences. With these NDEs, we see people from all different kinds of backgrounds going to the good place. There are people who are atheists, Christians, non-Christians, and people from other religions that all seem to go to the good place. There's also been many books that you can read about NDEs, and some are written by very scholarly people. Some that I mentioned in the last episode were books by Dr. John Hagen and Dr. Eben Alexander. Many NDEs have been studied by scientists, medical professionals, scholars, theologians, and highly learned researchers. So maybe there's legitimate accounts of ghosts and hauntings. Maybe it's not 100% of all cases, but there seems to be some legitimacy to some of these claims. Another book about these two issues of ghosts and NDEs was published in 1857, and it's titled The Spirits Book. That was written by Allan Kardec. He found a lot of the same things that I did. Now, let's get back to what I said earlier about how I might have seen some strange stuff or some paranormal activity. So, have I seen paranormal activity? Well, yes, I've seen some strange stuff. I guess some of you might want to say, okay, Lenny, what type of strange stuff have you seen? Well, let me first say that I've had family and friends that also witnessed some of those strange things. So it wasn't only me who saw those things, and I didn't make up some cheap fake story. A few different incidents that I witnessed can be corroborated by family members, friends, and coworkers. Some of those incidents involved a few different types of phenomena. I've seen shadow figures, full-body apparitions, and objects seemingly move on their own. My mother has seen some of it, and a friend stood next to me when we both saw an apparition run across a hallway. I've even had a few incidents where I heard disembodied voices call my name, and one of those was at a relative's house. That relative said it happened to their family as well. Some of my coworkers have heard unexplained sounds and voices calling their name when no one else was in the house we were refurbishing. I've also been at my house when no one else was home and had many strange things happen. I heard footsteps, sounds of doors opening and closing on their own, and heard talking in the house. I even heard a person shout out my name, and as I went to look around, I never could find anybody in the house. Since I knew about NDEs and that some spirits might get stuck here, I wanted to help any spirits that got stuck. So I've learned to talk to them and tell them about God's love and universal reconciliation. I tell the ghosts about how God loves all of us and that we can all go to the good place. I tell the ghosts that I can pray for them and ask God to open a door for them to go to heaven. So I then pray for them, and usually after that, I don't see them anymore or have any problems with paranormal activity. I heard one expert named Amy Allen who said that ghosts are people too, but they just don't have a body. So I've found that if you show them respect, they almost always show respect in kind and don't get violent. At least that's what I've noticed for the most part. So in a way, I guess you could say I'm a ghostbuster, or at least I help the ghosts move on into the afterlife. I talk to them respectfully and try to help them move on and enjoy universal reconciliation. I've actually done this in a few houses and didn't have problems after that for the most part. So some people might be wondering, who is this Lenny guy and what is he like? Is he the guy that talks about God's love and Christian beliefs, or the guy who talks about paranormal stuff? Could it be a combination of both? Maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe some of my paranormal experiences were brought on by my type 2 NDE that I had. I've heard other people who had an NDE and they said similar things. Now, if you would be interested in knowing about the paranormal things I've seen, I have a YouTube channel for that. Since I have software that I use to make CGI animations, I use it to make video reenactments of those events. If you go to the YouTube channel, you might recognize the animation style and recognize my voice narrating it. That YouTube channel is called Our Family's True Tales of the Supernatural. I'll give you a word of warning before you watch those videos, and I'll say that the content can be disturbing and eerie. So some of the content might not be suitable for younger children. I'd consider it rated PG-13. Yet, if you see how I learned to deal with those situations, it became less scary after a while. It turned out that I simply helped those folks move on to the afterlife. I think I've helped at least 3 or 4 move on. So there's no need for fear, and there's no need to get uptight about this sort of thing. I don't think anything that is fear-based is all that helpful. Remember that the Bible shows us in 1 John 4:18 that anyone who fears has not been perfected by love or God's love. In other words, they don't know about God's love. That's how I try to turn the situation around, because I tell the ghosts about God's unconditional love. So those folks don't need to fear an angry God. They also don't need to fear that God will harshly verbally chastise them or send them to eternal conscious torment in hell. Sometimes I even prayed that God would open a door to heaven if those folks would never be sent to hell. I said that to help those spirits feel more comfortable about moving on. I also prayed that those folks would get the chance to peek through the door to make sure everything would be okay on the other side. I think of it like the verse in Philippians 2:10-11 that says, "Every knee shall bow and every tongue will joyfully confess that Jesus is Lord." So how can they joyfully proclaim it if God was harsh toward them? They could only joyfully proclaim it if God was good and loving to them. So I know God is pure light, and in Him there isn't the least hint of ever turning away from being pure love and goodness. So of course God will treat those folks with kindness. So once again, God's love wins. All we need to do is ask for God's help based on His love and goodness. You can't lose. Now, if it's a case where you or someone in your family has PK abilities that are causing the problem, I have some solutions. I have solutions and a test to see who has the PK abilities. I heard one expert, Amy Allen, give a good test for PK abilities. That test is simply this. You just ask if a person sometimes has very vivid dreams. That's a sign of PK abilities. If you or someone in your family also had an NDE or a dream of going to heaven, that's a good indicator also. Now, if your PK energy emanations are out of control, here's what experts say you can do to remedy the situation, especially if it attracts ghosts or projects images of ghosts. Excess anxiety and depression make the PK energy increase and emanate in frequent and uncontrollable ways. So you can do a few things to decrease your anxiety and depression. Here's what usually stops it. 1. You can decrease stress and depression by meditating in order to relax. If you think meditation isn't a Christian thing, then remember the Bible verse, "Be still and know that I am God." So try to be still and concentrate on God and God's love. You could also take a deep breath and pray for God to help you remain calm and ask God to help you in your life. 2. Another way to decrease your stress level is to get counseling to deal with the cause of your anxiety and depression. Hopefully, the counseling could help you deal with any stress-related issues or depression. 3. The third way to decrease your PK energy is by what's called grounding. To do this, You take your shoes and socks off and put your bare feet on the ground outside. So you put your bare feet on the dirt and grass on the ground. Keep them on the ground for at least 2 to 5 seconds, and then go back inside. You can then wash your feet to make sure there's no hygiene issues. That usually takes care of my PK issues for months. I prefer not to really use sage anymore because I don't want to push spirits away. I want to tell them about God's love. Now, if you want me to do any paranormal investigations for you, I'd have to say that I really have no extra money to travel. Yet I can tell you how to take care of the issue for free. Just speak out loud to any spirits you think are in your house and teach them about God's love and universal reconciliation. Tell them that this is what the early Christians believed. Then tell the spirits that you're going to pray that God will open a door for them to move on and go to heaven. Then simply pray a prayer asking God to open that door for them to go to heaven. That's what I did, and it seemed to have worked. That's it. You can do that on your own. If you need any further consulting, well, just remember that nothing is guaranteed. You see, since ghosts are people too, but they just don't have a body, nothing is guaranteed with any human relationships. The best you can do is show love and kindness. Then all you can do is hope the other people will recognize your kindness and show kindness and respect in return. So I no longer run away and cower in fear, but I simply show love and try to move ghosts on into the afterlife. Always remember that God loves you, and as 1 Corinthians 13:5 shows, God, in His love, doesn't keep records of your wrongs. Yet, as for now, I'm Lenny Manning saying, I hope to see you in the next episode of the Agape Guy Show. Goodbye for now.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love. I see the flags unfurl and they're blowing